Hi, continuing my thoughts for today, and today we'll be talking about tariffs. I'm recording this on Monday, so you're seeing it on Tuesday, as usual, the day after I'm recording this, but we just had a very interesting last 2 days of last week, Thursday and Friday. Trump announced his these enormous tariff increases just suddenly that he's intending to, that he already did impose, and there's been a little craziness and consternation and confusion in the markets, both among the stock market, which I'll get to in a second, and in the just the business community. People, especially obviously people who manufacture things and need to, or even retailers who have to buy things wholesale from overseas, and now they're going to. Personal experience. I was in a Mazda dealership the other day. I happen to own a Mazda, and I was bringing it in for the regular checkup, and it turns out they're going to have to do some stuff to it. Don't get me started on that. It's going to cost me a whole bunch of money, put it that way, but not as much as, I asked them about, these tariffs, are they going to affect you? And they said they already are affecting us. In fact, I'm thinking of, I have to go back on Friday, I'm thinking of interviewing these guys to in the service department, the front desk. They told me that they're already getting the revised MSRPs, manufacturing suggested retail price. They are already. I thought that they would sell their current inventory at the regular prices that they already have, and then the new stuff coming in, because these. If the cars come from Japan, that's one thing. If if there's a Mazda factory, I'm not going to take time to look it up, then it would be manufactured here, but would be using at least some parts, probably most parts, from Japan. So the prices are going up, and I asked them, how much would it go up? And first of all, they said, as I was getting to, they are going to raise prices immediately on the current inventory. They're not going to wait for the new inventory. And they told me this is why I want to probably try to do an interview or get another further explanation. But they said because otherwise it creates a used car market or something. So they have to have all the cars have to be the same price, and so that's what the word. So they did a calculation, and they said that the average price of our cars is about $36,000, and the tariff said the price will go up $9,000. $9,000 on a $36,000 car. So that's what you're looking at. Now, in fairness, I could be mistaken. Maybe they said 6,000. Well, let's go with 6,000, but I think they said 9,000. But that's going to be a pretty steep increase, and that's going to cause a lot of problems. So there is, let me put up some good news, I guess, which is, let me put this up. What you're looking at is a list of countries, and these are just some of 50 countries. I think it's up to 55 actually by now, countries that have already called the telephone that they want to negotiate. But there is still a problem of how these are going to work out. There's a big, first of all, the shock. To give you an idea how much it's roiling the stock markets, I'll give you a little insight. If you don't know much about the stock market or trading, if you have any portfolio at all, if you have a 401k plan, if you have anything, if you checked your portfolio, whatever holdings you may have or stock you may own or mutual funds, you're going to notice that they've gone way down. Myself, my savings, my sport portfolio with Fidelity, that's down about 13% in 2 or 3 days. That's quite a significant drop. But let me just turn my head and look for a second. Okay, now the markets were very topsy-turvy today, and they were down. When I woke up this morning, the S&P 500 was down about over 200 points, and right now it is actually up about 9 points. So that's an encouraging trend, I guess, but that happened earlier. There was some news coming out that the president was way down 200 points, and then there was some news came out, a network reported that Trump, now that all these people want to negotiate with him, that he was going to suspend the tariffs for 90 days, and the market just went up like that, shot up like a rocket, and about, I think, even like 80 or something, very positive. It just went up to a lot. And then the White House made an announcement and said that that was fake news, that no, he's not pausing. The negotiations will be, as they say, under fire. They'll be negotiating, the tariffs will stay on. So boom, the market just went down again. And now, as I just reported, now it's up 12, almost 13 points. So it's fluctuating. And the reason it's fluctuating so much is because nobody's trading. There are very few contracts being traded, and therefore you don't have a lot of, usually the S&P 500 is one of the most, the futures is one of the most liquid markets in the world. And so there are hundreds of people, a lot of people trading at one time, so you can pick a price, and at any price you pick, you can get in at that price. There's not a lot of, it goes up a little tick by tick, but you're seeing these enormous jumps now because there's nobody trading in between, say, this price and that price. But the way you really know is the margins. Now, the commodity clearinghouses, there are two sets of margins. Now, there's the one set by the exchanges, the exchanges like the CME or the NYMEX or whatever, and that is for the S&P 500, the E-mini S&P 500 will go with, which is about a tenth of the S&P 500. That's the one that a lot of people trade, and the margin is 19,000. No, it was about 16,000 something, and it was 16,000 for what they call maintenance, which is if you want to buy and hold for a long time. Now, the clearinghouses where you trade, the people where you would put your account and where you would, place your trades, they would do the trades for you. Well, now it's all done electronically. You can do it from your computer. But they set their own day trading margins. If you're just going to trade for the day, if you're a day trader, get in and then get out in a few minutes or an hour later. If you're not going to hold overnight, then the margin is much lower. So for the mini S&P, E-mini S&P 500, the maintenance was 16,500, but the day trading margin was only $400, much less, as long as you're not going to hold overnight. And this morning, though, I got an email, last evening. They raised the margin, the maintenance margin, 19,700, I think, 500 or 700, over 19,000. But the day trading margin, exactly the same. To place a trade where you go in and get out like a minute later, theoretically, some of these what they call scalpers who just get in and get out in a few seconds. That's it's going to cost you $19,000 to do that. So that's why you see nobody's trading, because that's an insane amount of margin. So you see how the markets are being confused now. All this turmoil in the markets now. Now I'm looking. You're gonna have to forgive me as I keep turning my head. I've got a computer screen to my right, and this is what I'm talking about. The price. You never see this. The price. The index changing so fast. Now you have the Dow Jones was down about this morning when the market opened 9:30 Eastern time, was down 1,100 points, and now it's down only 50 points, about 60 points. It's fluctuating every second, which is understandable. But you have, I told you just only a few, maybe less than a minute ago that I said the S&P was at about 10 points. Now it's 20 points. So it's doubled, in just a few seconds. And the problem is that the reason we have all this confusion, which is I understand what they're doing, sort of. I mean, the idea, they have two things they want to do, and this is what I'm going to get to. I'll give you a little preview. Plus, by the way, I've got a big bonus at the end that I hope you stick around with for. I should have said that at the beginning. But you have, so stick around for that. But the problem is that they have two goals. Number one, to reduce our trade deficit with other countries, and then number two, fairness, what they keep calling trade fairness, where their tariffs are so much higher than ours to equalize. Now the problem is those two things are contradictory. They are contradictory. There are two camps in the White House. This is what I'll be getting to, that want two different goals, and they are not compatible, and that's what is causing all this confusion. Plus things that, the main point of confusion, what dropped when I was kind of had my eye on the market. I have a home office, so I can keep part of my screen on the market. I like to watch, keep the Fox Business Channel, which I highly recommend while I'm doing my work. And when Trump had the Rose Garden talk and he announced what he was going to do with the tariffs, first of all, he said 10% across the board tariffs, and the market actually went up on that. But then when he pulled up that big, that chart and started going with these very high tariffs, that's when the market just bang went down. But the problem is where he showed is before he went through those numbers is how they calculated those numbers. Now, what I was expecting was one of the reasons I voted for Trump was because there's so many reasons, but one was the Biden administration. They had all these pointy-head, pencil-pushing academics who never ran a business, never had to hire anybody, fire anybody, never lived in the real world, to be frank about it. And Trump brought in Scott Bessent and Harold Lutnick and all these people who are really financial guys. Plus, Doug Burgum. Okay, he was the governor. He was a governor, but before that, he built a business. I think a multi-billion dollar business. And of course, he has Elon Musk. All these people with real world experience. So that was why. One of the reasons I voted for him, but, which I'll be getting to, Peter Navarro. He is a Harvard economist. He is an he's an academic, and he is playing a very big role in this policy. And I think I hold him responsible for the way that Trump said that they calculated these tariffs that he announced on that big chart that he was holding up. Now, what I was expecting was, first of all, there are a whole lot of countries, 195 countries in the world, and not all of them are these major trade deficit tariff offenders. A lot of them are just, little countries. And so I tell you how sloppily they did this. That surprised me. You may have already heard this, they put a tariff on a little island that is inhabited only by penguins. No actual people, no human beings live there. And you can see that they did not take a lot of care in this. Now, I was expecting they would go pick the worst offenders like the European Union, China, and maybe a couple others, and then go with a fine tooth comb, go through those countries and see exactly what they're doing, because they're talking about not just tariffs, but they're talking about other non-tariff barriers. For instance, one of them would be this insane Well, one of the things the European Union does is they make these very high standards for our things that we buy here, especially food, say beef. Did you know Australia, we get a lot of beef from Australia. Do you know that Australia gets no beef from us? And why is that? Because, not because their beef is so much better. Australia does not allow any American beef to be sold in Australia. And what they do is they set some kind of health standard that it has no practical purpose. It doesn't make the beef any safer or any better. We're eating it, American beef, but it's specifically to set a requirement that we cannot meet in order to keep our product out of their country. And the European Union is terrible at doing this too. Don't get me started. So that is one of the things you're talking about. What I expected the Trump administration do is to go through each of these countries and see exactly what they're doing and try to put a number on it and say, okay, well, this is what it's costing us. I mentioned also Canada, no American bank. I used to bank when I lived in New York at TD Bank. That's Toronto Dominion Bank. That is a Canadian bank. There are no American banks in Canada because Canada does not allow American banks to operate in Canada. These are the things Airbus. Airbus is a consortium of 3 countries, Britain, France, and Germany, because they wanted to have an airline industry like we have with Boeing. But their government subsidizes Airbus. That is unfair. They should be getting no subsidies, and Airbus should be forced to operate like a regular business. But again, I expected our administration to go through and try to put a number on those things, but they didn't do that. All they did was they created a formula. I'm going to put the text up to explain, to give you an example of this, but it's very simple. What they're doing is they're taking the trade deficit that we will have with a particular country and dividing it by the amount that we buy from them. Okay, so let me put this text up here and I'll go through the example. You might have to replay this once or twice. I'm warning you because just watch. Okay, let's just go through this together. Okay, as an example, if the U.S. imports $100 million worth of goods and services while exporting $50 million to a country, then the Trump administration alleges that country levies a 50% tariff on the United States. The difference between $100 million and $50 million divided by $100 million. The reciprocal tariff put into effect by President Trump on Wednesday would be half of that, 25%. Okay, so do you get that? Let's go through it again. I'll go through it slowly, but it's suppose we're getting 100 million from another country. But they only buy 50 million from us. So we're buying 100 million from them. And then what they're going to do is what Trump did, subtracted the 50 million that they buy from us from the 100 million that we buy from them, and then that's 50 billion left, and that is a trade deficit. And then they're just taking that number and dividing that number by the 100 million that we buy from them, and that's supposed to include all the non-tariff barriers that I just mentioned a few minutes ago. And bottom line, that makes no sense at all. And they're not keeping in mind that one of the factors they're not considering is that people may just prefer the other product. Now, the example I will give you, this is another personal example. I did this experiment the other day, 2 days in a row. You can do it yourself, actually. But take cars. Now, they're saying, you have Trump saying that, let's say Japan, that they don't take our cars. They don't take our cars. So, right. So they have tariffs on our cars, and so that's why there are few American cars, or very few American cars being sold in Japan. But obviously what he's saying is that it's unfair on their side, but we're being fair on our side. We only have a 2.5% tariff. Okay, so there's a 2.5% tariff on the Japanese car, or there was until 2 days ago, but or a few days ago. But in this country, there is no tariff, okay? I mean, on the American cars, so 2% tariff on Japanese cars, no tariff on our cars. So that's definitely a fair playing field. Now, you go out and do this experiment. I did it the other day. I was just driving in my car, which is a Mazda, by the way, okay? So I own a Japanese car. Now, and I just looked at the nameplates on all the other cars in the traffic. Now, I saw a couple of pickup trucks that were, Ford pickup, your F-150s. And I think I saw an SUV that was a Chevy or something, but easily 9 out of 10 cars that I saw on the road in Tennessee as I was driving were foreign makes: Mazdas, Hondas, VWs, mostly Japanese cars, though, Toyotas, mostly Japanese cars. So in this fair playing field that we have here, Americans prefer Japanese cars, for whatever reason, and I'm, I don't feel guilty about it, because I own a Japanese car too. Before I moved to Tennessee, I was living in New York, had no car, needed a car, went on Consumer Reports and looked at all the evaluations, the scores of the cars, and the Mazda 3 came out on top. Then I don't know what it is, where it is today, today's ranking, but 2019, January 2019, Mazda was on top. I bought a Mazda, and that I don't feel bad about that at all. Now the problem is now, so you see Americans overwhelmingly seem to now, I don't know what the percentage is. I think countrywide it's 50-50. So if that's true, then we'll see what happens in Japan. But if it's like here, where what if we have Japan eliminates its tariffs on American cars, and Japanese, if Americans overwhelmingly prefer Japanese cars, then should we be surprised if Japanese people prefer Japanese cars also? So what if the Trump gets whatever he wants as far as tariffs, gets whatever he wants, and the number of American cars being sold, they just send them to Japan and they just sit on lots and nobody buys them, and just like here, we're electric cars, GM makes electric cars and they just sit on lots and nobody buys them. So what is GM supposed to do? What are the other Japanese American car dealers supposed to do? They have all these cars and nobody's buying them. So this gets us now finally it took us a while, but to the main point that is in the title. You have two factions right now I put their photos up, a couple in the thumbnail for this talk today, where you have on one side you have Peter Navarro, and on the other side you have Scott Bessent, and there you have Peter Navarro, and you have Harold Lutnick, that's one side, and then you have, and Harold Lutnick is, he's a businessman, but he's a financial guy. I mean, he used to run Cantor Fitzgerald, okay? He was, and maybe he'll go back to running it after this administration is done, but and just a leave of absence, but he's it's a financial firm. And then on the other side, you have Scott Bessent, who built businesses. He's a real world businessman, and there was somebody else on his side. I think Kevin Hassett is the other person. He's an economist too. Okay, so I guess both sides, you got one academic sort of, and then you get one academic and then one kind of real world person. I don't know if I put Harold Lutnick quite in that category, because it doesn't make things, okay, which is what we're talking about. But the point is, you have one side, the side I side with, actually, full disclosure, the Scott Bessent side, which wants fair trade, where you want, let's say, we have catfish from Vietnam flooding the country and into the country cheap, right? Or the shrimpers are going out of business. The same thing from Vietnam, getting cheap shrimp from Vietnam because low wages and probably work standards don't match ours, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, but mostly it's the tariffs. I'm sorry, I'm confusing them. That's really the Navarro's side in a way, but they're talking about fair trade, fairness on one side, which is basically Vietnam, the shrimpers. Okay, we're getting all this shrimp, but they are putting Vietnam, now they just agreed to lower their tariffs. I showed them in that chart I showed earlier. They want to negotiate. They are putting high tariffs on our products that we ship to Vietnam, but we don't put hardly any tariffs on their things. Okay, so that's a problem that we're having, and you have to forgive me if I go off. As I've said in the past, I just stop. I take a moment from working. I don't prepare these talks, so forgive me if I sometimes make a mistake and have to backtrack. Anyways, so that's the one side. They want the tariffs just lowered. The ideal situation on their side would be to have the zero tariffs 0, and account for these other things, these non-tariff barriers that I mentioned. Okay, that's one side. But then there's the other side, the Navarro side, that wants to erase the trade deficits, and that is a very big problem. The Scott Bessent side, that makes sense. Change the laws, raise and lower, your tariffs to match ours, and not keep, and change these other non-tariff barriers that keep our products out. That is reasonable. But now we get to the unreasonable, crazy, in my mind, side, the Navarro side, which and this is unfortunately, I believe, to be the Trump side. As you're going to see, remember I promised you a bonus. You're going to see that at the end. But this idea of that if we have a trade deficit with another country, that they must be cheating, that it just means they're cheating somehow, and that if we get whatever Trump wants, that the deficit will disappear, and that there is absolutely no basis for concluding that. Now, it could be a factor in some instances, but the mere presence, that's the problem. Trump did not go country by country to see what they were doing and to see whether it was because of cheating or simply product preference or simply because they have things that we need and we don't have something they need, or they can't afford what we need. And one of the perfect examples somebody gave was Madagascar. Okay, Madagascar is a very poor country, and Trump, as I said, he's even tariffing countries that have only penguins on it, islands. So you see the point here. They just went across the board, and so Madagascar, he put a big tariff on Madagascar. Now, what do we get from Madagascar? We get vanilla, because we don't have it here. We just whatever the geography, the weather, whatever, we don't have vanilla here. We have to get all of that. We get a lot of our vanilla, and maybe other countries, from Madagascar. Then there's also cinnamon from Vietnam, but let's just stick with Madagascar, because Madagascar, that's all they have. Vietnam, and they're manufacturing a lot of things, but Madagascar, you're really just talking vanilla, okay? So we have to get our vanilla from there, but they are a poor country. They can't afford to buy much from us. There's no way to erase a trade deficit with Madagascar, because this country is simply too poor to buy as much from us as we're paying for vanilla from them. So do you see how it makes no sense? And we're just going to be punishing Madagascar for no reason. And that is why, as I say in the title to today's talk, that's why this matters. If Trump is going, and I'll throw one other factor in here, that the idea, again, Scott Bessent's side, was the ideal situation is to reduce the tariffs to zero. And Trump apparently, from my impression, is leaning more to the Peter Navarro side. So the 10% tariff of everything. I showed you the chart. I gave you the calculation. I left something out of the calculation. Forgive me. Here it is, because it's not the calculation. It's that formula that I showed you. And then what he said was he would divide the deficit by the total amount bought from some other country. And then he said, well, he's going to be generous and say in China's case, it came out to 67%, but he's going to only make it half. Okay. So it was like 34% or something. Now it may go even higher because China said they're going to raise their tariff, and now Trump is saying he's going to add another 50% if China does not rescind the tariff that they announced to start on, I believe, April 10th. So if they haven't done it by April 9th. So you see, we could be in the starting point of a trade war. Now, the problem here is that Trump is leaning towards the Navarro side, and I say to the formula, it's going to be whatever result we get from that formula, the higher of that or the lower of that or 10%, okay, or the higher of that or 10%. So if it turns out that the tariff under his calculation would be 5%, so it should be less. That's Scott Bessent's side. Trump's going to make it 10% anyhow. It will never go below 10%. So you go, we're only charging a 2.5% tariff. We were 2.5% tariff on German cars. That's going to go up. Now it's going up. I forget what the percentage is, but it's going to be maybe 20-something%, I think, 24%. But the most it would ever come down to, even if Germany lowers their tariff to zero, we're still going to charge them 10%, which to me, again, makes no sense, because as far as I know, the European Union, I've seen no reports that they're manipulating their currency. China, maybe, other countries, South Korea, maybe. Germany, I haven't heard that. And then the problem, all these low-wage countries, undercutting and allowing for cheap goods. Germany is a high-wage country, so I don't understand where they're getting this idea of 10% for everybody, no matter what. And the most I've been able to figure out is somebody, I forget who, said that, well, because everybody we're the big market. I mean, you got to remember, there's 195 or more countries in the world, so who cares if one country raises its tariffs? But obviously, if the United States raises its tariff, then it causes a big problem. The old saying, America sneezes, everybody else gets a cold. And you have all these economies around the world who are basing their economies not on their own people consumption, but on exports. They're relying on other countries to provide jobs and provide demand for their products in excess of what their own people would want to buy. Okay, the demand from their own people, but that country is the main country of choice is the United States. We're basically we're the customer for the rest of the world, basically. We're the main. It's like if you own a business and you have a lot of little customers, and then you have my father, personal experience again. He had, a fruit market. I used to work in his fruit market. I started at the age of 11, actually. And he had the fruit market, right? And he had all his customers, these little old ladies would come in and buy squeeze 3 tomatoes and buy 1, something like that. But then there was this one doctor who made pickles every year, and he liked to make pickles, and he would order, 10 bushels or 10 packs of of cucumbers, the little cucumbers to make pickles, and plus all the dill and the spices and everything to do it. And he was a big customer. And then the other times he would come in, and we'd had a couple customers that would buy a lot of stuff. And it's almost, we're like a big customer. We buy a lot of stuff, and everybody depends on their one big customer, which is us. And the logic seems to be, well, since we're in so much demand, we're going to just charge a 10% tariff across the board to everybody just for the privilege of doing business with us. Now, the problem with that, hopefully it won't happen soon, hopefully it won't happen ever, but the old saying goes, you screw people on the way up. If you go down, you meet those same people on the way down. And that's not, there is a potential for harm. And I guess I'll just close now. If there are any Europeans watching this, you have to understand that you have, maybe it's going to change now because of Trump wanting people to pay, for their defense, Europe, NATO, that the way we are right now, Europe, you people in Europe, you very dependent on the United States for your protection. We pay a lot more. We spend a lot more on defense in all of your countries, probably more than the European countries all combined. And we have to, if there's a war, this happened in World War II. The reason that England, if anybody here is, any of His Majesty's subjects are watching this, the reason you're not speaking German right now is because, of course we fought on your side, and you Brits, you fought bravely. The RAF never have so many depended on so few, the Royal Air Force, for so much, and we appreciate what you've done, but a lot of it made it possible was the Lend-Lease program. We provided the weapons. And I'm not, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying, well, you should be grateful and thank us for providing all the weapons. What I'm saying is that we had a strong manufacturing base that enabled us to provide those weapons. Now, these were not, we had some arms manufacturers, but a lot of, say, the tanks that we were using in World War II, there was no defense contractor that built, or there may have been that built some, but it was the automobile factories. They switched over to wartime production, and they started producing tanks and maybe artillery pieces and all sorts of weapons. And you had Boeing, and you had McDonnell Douglas. You had all these airline companies who were building civilian aircraft, and then they were able to switch to wartime production. And that's what I would hope you Europeans would get, and you Asians would get, you Japanese and et cetera, that you. Japan has a pretty strong manufacturing base, but Europe, you may need us. You may need our manufacturing capacity. So when our factories are closing so that they can go to and opening in China or and China starts manufacturing things, China, if there's a war with China, China's not going to make tanks for us. If Russia invades Poland again and invades invades Europe, China is not going to supply weapons. So Russia has no, probably they couldn't even supply themselves. They're barely doing it now, but just a war with Ukraine. But the point is, you need us to have factories, many vibrant, strong, financially solvent factories, because you may need our manufacturing prowess someday. And making it, competition is one thing, but making it so, if we reach a point where the United States is just just a service economy, and we're just making software and just providing services. Oh, and that's another trade barrier that I hope that Trump will deal with. Your DSA, your Digital Services Agreement, or whatever it's called, whatever DSA stands for. But you're starting to finding our say X and Google, finding our countries for not restricting free speech. And that is just, well, number one, I don't know how long we're going to stand for it. Probably not long, number one. Number two, it's just a meaning, it's just a way to it's ransom, it's extortion, just to get money from our companies, from our Google and our X, because you can't build the equivalent in Europe. That's what it is, plain and simple, another unfair barrier. Anyways, I've gone on so long today that I'm glad you stuck with me, but I did promise you a bonus. So I'm going to, here is the bonus. Trump talking about these tax cuts, and obviously in 2015 coming down the golden escalator and announcing a run for president. And well, you may have thought that the idea of running for president, as I did, was in 2015, everybody urging him to run, and then this tariff stuff, part of his campaign. But here is on the Oprah Winfrey show. Here is Donald Trump, a young Donald Trump in the 1980s. I think 1985, I'm not sure, but here is a young Donald Trump interviewed by Oprah Winfrey, and you will maybe notice the audience, mostly women, I think, and pretty much the same audience, I guess, of that, the daughters of those people who are now audiences for The View, that TV show. But how nice they are to Donald Trump in this interview. It's just a must watch. So you heard enough from me today. I'll come off at the end, to say goodbye. But here is Donald Trump, a young Donald Trump.
Last year criticizing U.S. foreign policy. What would you do differently, Donald?
I'd make our allies, forgetting about the enemies you can't talk to so easily, I'd make our allies pay their fair share. We're a debtor nation. Something's going to happen over the next number of years with this country, because you can't keep going on losing $200 billion, and yet we let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade. If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Oprah. Just forget about it. It's almost impossible. They don't have laws against it. They just make it impossible. They come over here, they sell their cars, their VCRs, they knock the hell out of our companies. And hey, I have tremendous respect for the Japanese people. I mean, you can respect somebody that's beating the hell out of you, but they are beating the hell out of this country. Kuwait, they live like kings. The poorest person in Kuwait, they live like kings. And yet they're not paying. We make it possible for them to sell their oil. Why aren't they paying us 25% of what they're making? It's a joke.
This sounds like political presidential talk to me, and I know people have talked to you about whether or not you want to run. Would you ever?
Probably not, but I do get tired of seeing the country ripped off.
Why would you not? I
just don't think I really have the inclination to do it. I love what I'm doing. I really like it.
Also, it doesn't pay as well.
No, it doesn't. But, I just probably wouldn't do it, Oprah. I probably wouldn't, but I do get tired of seeing what's happening with this country. And if it got so bad, I would never want to rule it out totally, because I really am tired of seeing what's happening with this country, how we're really making other people live like kings, and we're not.
You've said, though, that if you did run for president, you believe you'd win.
Well, I don't know. I think I'd win. I tell you what, I wouldn't go in to lose. I've never gone in to lose in my life. And if I did decide to do it, I think I'd be inclined, I would say that I would have a hell of a chance of winning, because I think people, I don't know how your audience feels, but I think people are tired of seeing the United States ripped off. And I can't promise you everything, but I can tell you one thing, this country would make one hell of a lot of money from those people that for 25 years have taken advantage. It wouldn't be the way it's been, believe me.
That's it. Thanks for stopping by. I see I've spoken for, 40 minutes. I think that's a record for me, 42 minutes, and not counting, a few more, a little Donald Trump there. But thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate it if you stayed around this long. And Your comments would be welcome in the comment section below the video. Share this video with anyone you think would benefit from it. But most of all, come back and see me again. I would love to see all of you again. And until I do see all of you again, bye.